Let's deal first with those second wave concerns, because they could be becoming a reality in Spain, the UK imposing the quarantine. As you've heard that news over the weekend, do those second wave fears and the way you have to deal with it in your business become more live for you today?
Well, I think this is something that every business is going to have to deal with as we move forward. The governments have done a relatively good job with the lockdowns at the start of the coronavirus back in March and April. However, I think the current track and trace will hopefully reduce the requirement to lock down large tracts of Europe again as we look into the winter and beyond. But it does remain a big risk for the airline sector into the winter months. We're planning this year to carry about 60 million customers in our business, which is about a 60% reduction on what we carried last year, where we had 149 million. And as you rightly said, we had a very difficult quarter where we made a loss of 185 million. We would be hopeful that the losses into Q2 are somewhat lower than we saw in Q1.
Yeah, so just talk me through as to what impact that could actually have on the numbers. I know it's difficult to predict, but if those second wave fears materialise to the extent that we start to see more quarantines imposed to other countries other than Spain, does that mean potentially several quarters of losses, Neil?
Well, I think this year you're not going to, and we're not guiding for the full year, but you're not going to see profits in the current financial year. I think you're going to have to look into next year before you start to see a recovery on that front. And that's why the likes of cash preservation is hugely important. We ended the quarter with 3.9 billion cash, up from 3.8 billion in the previous quarter, which puts us in a pretty strong position as we go into the winter period. Equally, we've got a lot of competitors who are receiving significant amounts of state aid, which I think is inevitably going to lead to some form of below-cost selling from them, which will lead to reduced fares. So it's very important that the likes of Ryanair right-size our business, and we're doing that. We're getting our cost base into even better shape than it was. We're reducing our labour costs. We're reducing our airport and handling. We're working with our aircraft manufacturers and lessors to reduce the cost of aircraft and lease rentals going forward. So we're planning for these kind of scenarios within the business. We would hope, however, that the trace and track strategies put in place by governments will help stave off a second wave and huge lockdowns. We would also be hopeful that we'll see some kind of a vaccine either this year or early into next year, which will give people a lot more confidence in flying.
Yeah, so you've talked about some of the measures that you've taken on the cost side, Neil, but in terms of the revenue side, how is demand shaping up at the moment, and what are your projections for demand over the summer?
Well, at the moment, we're flying about 40% of our capacity, over 90% of our network in July, with load factors just over 70%. We would hope to and expect to increase that up to 60% capacity into August and about 70% of our capacity into September. There was a fair amount of pent-up demand as we saw lockdowns being relaxed over the months of May and June. So a lot of visiting friends and relations. A fair bit of leisure traffic. Business is a little bit slower to come back, and I don't think that will come back properly until we see people going into their offices in the autumn of this year. But demand has been fairly solid. We're taking a relatively cautious approach in rolling out the various routes. We're working on our winter schedules at the moment, and we'll hopefully have those finalised over the coming weeks. But at this stage, our best estimate is that we will carry approximately 60 million customers this year, which, to put that in context, is down about 60% on the 149 million that we carried in the last financial year.
Yeah. When do you see prices normalising, Neil?
Very difficult to say. We're in an environment now where the legacy carriers have been given so much state aid that they'll be able to sell below cost for many months to come. So that's why, as I said, we're right-sizing the cost base within Ryanair. Our strategy has always been to fill the planes and to keep the fares down, and that's why there's about a 200% gap between our average fare and the fares that our competitors charge. And we won't be found wanting when it comes to having low fares to compete in these markets.
On cost cuts, Neil, are there any further job cuts planned at all?
We would hope to minimise job reductions within the business. There have been some, and there most likely will be more. We probably see some more base closures, but we work very well with our people and their unions. And in fairness, they recognise where the world is at the moment in the post-COVID environment, and they've been willing to accept modest pay reductions and enhanced productivity, with a view to having that returned over a 3 to 5 year basis. So that's helped us reduce the number of jobs that we originally thought would be needed to take out of the business. But there will be some more job cuts over the coming weeks and months. We're looking at all facets of the business, but we've had certain success in the UK, in Ireland, and in some of our other markets, and we would hope to have more.
Yeah, and of course, you did. You've just mentioned the fact that you did reach that deal with pilots, with the union, on pay cuts. In terms of customers, though, Neil, so there's no doubt that a lot of people, anecdotally, are still quite hesitant to fly. So, what kind of measures are you taking to actually encourage people to fly beyond the price point?
Well, we've taken huge steps to ensure that it's safe to return to flying. We've fully implemented the European Centre for Disease Control and EASA recommendations, which were published back in May. We have a relatively young fleet, all fitted out with HEPA filters, which means the air quality on board the aircraft is comparable to that in an operating theatre in a hospital. Face masks and face coverings have become the new norm on board aircraft, and I have to say it's been a credit to both our customers and our staff that this has been observed without exception across the board. So we've made the travel experience as safe as possible. We're offering very competitive fares, and we're operating across 90% of our network, so lots of choice for customers out there. And we'll continue to offer choice and good value over the coming months.